It was disturbing to hear Dave say that. He's still stuck in some kind of non-reality, but there was still a lot of, boy, that he was hanging on to so much baggage. He'd never had a chance to have any closure.
Decades. It all began in 1983, when guitarist Dave Mustaine was fired from Metallica. The fallout didn't just reshape Metallica, it led to the creation of Megadeth, and one of the most talked-about rivalries in music history. For years, tensions between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine dominated headlines and fueled debates among metal fans. Now, decades later, in a rare moment, Hetfield has decided to speak openly about this shared history. What does he really think about Megadeth, about Mustaine, and the legacy of Metallica's early years? Let's find out. In the early 1980s, Metallica burst onto the scene, combining fast tempos and aggressive riffs to create a new sound that would later be called thrash metal. The band was formed by drummer Lars Ulrich and guitarist James Hetfield, but it was the addition of Dave Mustaine on lead guitar that gave their early music its raw edge. Mustaine's playing style was aggressive, precise, and full of attitude, qualities that helped define Metallica's early sound. Songs like The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire from their debut album Kill 'Em All owe much to Mustaine's contributions. But despite his talent, Mustaine's time in the band wasn't smooth. Problems arose over Mustaine's behavior, which included frequent arguments, heavy drinking, and clashes with other band members. Hetfield later admitted that the band struggled with Mustaine's unpredictable nature, saying, "We were all young and reckless, but Dave took it to a different level. It became impossible to work together." In 1983, right before Metallica recorded their debut album, the band made the difficult decision to fire Mustaine. He was replaced by guitarist Kirk Hammett, a move that would spark lifelong tension. For Mustaine, being dismissed from Metallica was devastating. In later interviews, he described the experience as a betrayal, one that fueled his desire to create a band even bigger and better than Metallica. Shortly after, Mustaine formed Megadeth, determined to compete with his former bandmates. This decision set the stage for one of heavy metal's biggest rivalries. Metallica, backed by their growing popularity and mainstream success, and Megadeth, led by Mustaine's determination to prove himself, became two powerhouse bands that pushed each other creatively and commercially. While Megadeth climbed to success, how did this rivalry with Mustaine influence Metallica's future and James Hetfield's leadership? After Dave Mustaine's firing in 1983, the rivalry between Metallica and Megadeth became deeply personal, especially for Mustaine. From the beginning, he treated his new band, Megadeth, as a way to prove his worth to Metallica. In numerous interviews, Mustaine admitted, "Every note I wrote, every song I recorded for Megadeth in the early years, I was trying to show them what they lost." On the other side, Metallica moved on quickly, releasing Kill 'Em All with Kirk Hammett on lead guitar. The album's success only deepened the bitterness. For Mustaine, it wasn't just about being replaced. It was about how much of his work still lived in Metallica's music. Songs as The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire were reworked versions of tracks Mustaine had contributed to before leaving the band, and he often voiced frustration about not receiving the recognition he felt he deserved. By the mid-1980s, the rivalry was fully public. Megadeth's debut album, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good in 1985, contained aggressive, fast-paced tracks that many interpreted as shots at Metallica. For example, the song Mechanics resembled Metallica's The Four Horsemen, but was played at an even faster tempo, Mustaine's way of reclaiming ownership of his original work. Meanwhile, Metallica was reaching new heights with albums Ride the Lightning in 1984 and Master of Puppets, 1986, cementing their status as thrash metal pioneers and surpassing Megadeth commercially. James Hetfield's leadership became a key factor in keeping Metallica stable amid their rising success, but the tensions with Mustaine lingered. In a 2009 interview with Classic Rock magazine, Hetfield revealed, "The Dave situation was always in the background. Even years later, there was still that unspoken competition. What intensified the rivalry further were the sharp words exchanged in the press. Mustaine often criticized Metallica's success, accusing them of abandoning their thrash roots for mainstream appeal, a sentiment that echoed with some fans during the release of the Black Album in 1991. Hetfield, however, rarely responded directly to Mustaine's comments, preferring to focus on Metallica's trajectory. But in one rare interview, he admitted, "His bitterness drove a lot of great music, but it also made things impossible between us. We were never going to see eye to eye. The tension between Metallica and Megadeth wasn't just personal, it became a defining part of their public personas. Fans were often divided, with some siding with Metallica's polished and accessible sound, while others admired Megadeth's technical intensity and refusal to compromise. The rivalry grew into one of the most compelling storylines in metal, influencing how both bands approached their music and their audiences. Over time, James Hetfield began to speak more openly about the rivalry with Dave Mustaine and the impact it had on both Metallica and Megadeth. While Hetfield remained focused on the success of his own band, the interpersonal conflict with Mustaine was something he could never fully avoid. In 2004, during the making of Metallica's documentary called Some Kind of Monster, Hetfield and Mustaine came face to face in a rare and emotional conversation. In the documentary, Mustaine expressed the pain of being fired from Metallica, telling Hetfield, "You never even said thank you. It's like you just threw me away." Though Hetfield admitted that the decision to fire Mustaine was necessary for the band's future, he also acknowledged the emotional toll it took. Reflecting on that meeting years later, Hetfield said, "It hit me how much hurt there still was. At the time, we were just trying to survive as a band, but I didn't realize how deeply it affected him." Despite the lingering resentment, Hetfield has also recognized Mustaine's contributions to Metallica's early sound. In a recent interview, Hetfield shared, "Dave was a huge part of our beginnings. His energy, his aggression, those things shaped who we were as a band in the early days." This acknowledgement marked a departure from Hetfield's earlier reluctance to speak about Mustaine's role in Metallica's history, reflecting a sense of maturity and growth. However, Hetfield has also been candid about the challenges of working with Mustaine. In multiple interviews, he described the early days of Metallica as chaotic, with volatile personalities and constant clashes. Hetfield admitted that their shared egos and youthful recklessness only fueled their conflicts. Looking back, he said, "We were all out of control, and when you put that much fire in one room, something's going to blow." In more recent years, Hetfield's reflections have focused less on the rivalry and more on the shared legacy between Metallica and Megadeth. Hetfield has described their strained relationship as both destructive and creatively powerful. He remarked in an interview last year, "Dave pushed us in ways we didn't realize at the time. His drive to prove himself made us push harder, too." While Hetfield and Mustaine have never fully reconciled, their interactions have softened in recent years. Mustaine has publicly expressed a desire to work with Hetfield again, though Hetfield has remained non-committal. When asked in a 2023 interview about the possibility of more collaboration with Mustaine, Hetfield replied simply, "I respect him, and I respect what he's done. That's where we are right now." Hetfield's reflections show a more measured perspective on a rivalry that has often been defined by passion and conflict. While he acknowledges the pain and division it caused, he also recognizes the creative fire it sparked for both Metallica and Megadeth. Even as James Hetfield looks back with respect, how has this rivalry continued to influence the music and legacy of both bands today? The decades-long rivalry between Metallica and Megadeth is often cited as one of the most significant storylines in heavy metal history. While the personal relationships were filled with tension, the competition between the two bands pushed both to excel, ultimately benefiting the genre as a whole. For Metallica, the rivalry served as a catalyst for their mainstream success. By the release of Master of Puppets in 1986 and the self-titled Black Album in 1991, the band had cemented their place as the dominant force in heavy metal. Their sound evolved from raw thrash to a polished and accessible form of metal, helping bring the genre into the global spotlight. Hetfield acknowledged the impact of the competition in a 2018 interview, stating, "Knowing Dave was out there trying to one-up us kept the fire alive. It wasn't just about fans or critics, it was about proving something to ourselves. For Megadeth, the rivalry became part of their identity. Dave Mustaine often mentioned that his mission was to exceed Metallica, driving him to produce albums like Peace Sells, but Who's Buying and Rust in Peace. These records showcased a more technical, intricate style of thrash metal, earning critical acclaim even if the band never reached Metallica's commercial heights. Mustaine himself has said in interviews, every Megadeth song in the early years had something to prove to Metallica. Without them, Megadeth wouldn't have been the same. Fans, too, played a significant role in deepening the rivalry. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, it wasn't uncommon to see metal communities divided into camps. Those who chose Metallica for their anthemic sound, and those who sided with Megadeth for their technical precision. Over time, however, that divide has softened. Many fans now celebrate what both bands brought to the genre, recognizing their individual contributions rather than comparing them. Interestingly, both Hetfield and Mustaine have expressed mixed feelings about how the feud has been portrayed by the media. Though the rivalry fueled some of their best work, it also became a distraction from their music. In a podcast interview last year, Hetfield mentioned, "In the end, it's about the music, not the arguments. What we created, both bands, it's something bigger than any fight we ever had." The competitive energy between Metallica and Megadeth left an undeniable mark on heavy metal, spurring innovation and setting the standard for what thrash metal could achieve. While their approaches and personalities differed, both bands pushed the boundaries of the genre in ways that continue to influence new generations of musicians. The rivalry between Metallica and Megadeth may have been born out of frustration, egos, and hurt feelings, but it also became one of the most defining narratives in heavy metal history. Over decades of tension and competition, these two bands pushed each other to their creative peaks, producing some of the genre's most iconic music. For James Hetfield, reflecting on this rivalry has meant accepting its complicated nature. On one hand, it was a source of tension that fractured relationships and created long-standing grudges. On the other hand, it forced both Metallica and Megadeth to excel in their own ways, setting new standards for what heavy metal could achieve. Hetfield's more recent reflections highlight the respect he has developed for Dave Mustaine's influence, even if their personal relationship remains distant. As the years have passed, the lines between rivalry and respect have blurred, with Eddie Van Halen's passing marking an emotional turning point in the world of rock. Hetfield has said in interviews that time often puts things into perspective. While the media frequently amplified the tension between Metallica and Megadeth, Hetfield has acknowledged that their shared journey ultimately contributed to something larger, a legacy of music that continues to inspire. Together, Metallica and Megadeth represent two sides of the same coin, bands that started from the same place but carved out distinct paths, creating a lasting impact on music history. While fans once divided themselves in loyalty to one band or the other, today both Metallica and Megadeth are celebrated for their contributions to heavy metal. Their rivalry may have been born out of conflict, but it matured into a story of resilience, creativity, and mutual influence. Ultimately, the story of Metallica and Megadeth reminds us that creative tension can be both destructive and inspiring. For James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, their shared history is marked by both struggle and triumph, proof that even the most complicated relationships